What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. And this is history. Today, we had a historic announcement. The deal for the rights, domestically anyways, for UFC content has finally been signed. It's finally complete. And we have a provider that nobody was expecting. I think people were talking about Amazon. People were talking about Netflix. And out of the woodwork comes Paramount Plus, and we have this deal. Actually, it's a two-part deal. It's with Paramount Plus, and then select numbered events will also be broadcast for free on CBS. So it's a pretty interesting deal. It's a massive deal in terms of people like me who are fans of the UFC and want to see the sport grow and spread. The fact that now it's no longer constricted to this pay-per-view model and people having to spend like 60 or 70 or $80 to see a fight and see the product. I think it's going to be great for the UFC because at its core, mixed martial arts, I think, is the best product out there. That's me. I mean, that's my opinion, but I think there's nothing more exciting than watching two guys get into a cage, two women get into a cage either way, and just see who the best fighter is, where so many things are on the line. Physical safety, you have to go through massive mental hurdles to get in there and compete. And as Dana White has said many times, at its core, no matter what other sport we're watching or we're interested in, when a fight breaks out in the stands, everybody's watching that fight, right? So I think the UFC, and this is when it comes to any sort of product creation and marketing, at its core, to be successful, you have to have a good product. And then the marketing can sort of add gasoline to the already existing fire, but you have to start with the core amazing product. And I think the UFC and mixed martial arts, it has that in spades with all the amazing fighters, with the amazing matchups, with the way that the product is delivered in terms of, production, timing, and whatnot. It's just picture perfect. They've done a great job. So we have a great product. Now we have the platform. And this is going to be a rising tide that raises all ships. The other good thing is if you are an investor in the UFC and own TKO stock, I think this is great from the investor side as well, because as we saw today, I think the stock price, last time I checked, it went up like 8% today, which I had a feeling once the deal was announced, it was going to shoot up. But I think part of the reason why it shot up in particular is because the cash deal that was announced in terms of what Paramount is paying the UFC, I think was beyond expectations. And we're going to talk about all of this. We're going to break it down in this video in a lot of detail. We're also going to compare it to other streaming deals with other organizations like the NFL, the NHL, et cetera, just to get an idea, an understanding of where this stands and where this deal sits amongst some of these other partnerships and what that means about the power of the UFC. So let's go through some of the specifics right off the bat. This is the deal. It's $1.1 billion per year for 7 years. So, of course, you do the multiplication. That's $7.7 billion. It's a big deal because previously, at least according to ChatGPT, I guess from ESPN, they were getting $300 million per year for 5 years from ESPN Plus, which is a massive amount of money. Now, I've heard different figures from what they were getting from ESPN. I heard somewhere else that it was higher. I don't know which is correct, whether it's 300, maybe closer to 500 million, but it was definitely not 1.1 billion per year. The difference, though, is they were also getting money from the pay-per-view purchases. So I don't know how that was being split with ESPN, but they were also getting that extra money. People have been saying that the pay-per-view sales have been dwindling as of late, so maybe it wasn't a ton of money, and this is a big jump up from what they're getting from ESPN. But either way, the number is very impressive, and I think that it bodes well for the future of the UFC and the sport of mixed martial arts as a whole. And then again, there's a PFL deal, just by comparison with ESPN, that was a multi-year deal. I wonder what's going to happen with that, by the way, as well, as now the UFC is moving away from ESPN. Will they continue to hang on to PFL, or will they let that go? We shall see. But the specifics, the monetary specifics of this deal were not published. I guarantee you they were getting nowhere close to what the UFC was getting, because I think it's just a completely different thing in terms of market and revenue numbers and whatnot. So this is kind of the deal in a nutshell. Now, here's where I think it gets interesting when we compare this deal to what other leagues have entered into in terms of deals with other networks for streaming. And it's cool now because now the UFC enters the same arena as we have for the NFL or the NBA, where it's so easily accessible for fans and for people to check out. But again, here we have the 1.1 billion per year on Paramount. We're going to talk about why I think that figure is so high. specifically because they went to Paramount Plus and CBS, as opposed to like Netflix or Amazon Prime, where they have a much bigger base of subscribers. But if we compare that to, like, for example, the NHL, is more than the NHL, according to, again, ChatGPT, but this is 625 million per year on ESPN and ABC. So they're getting more than the NHL, which is pretty crazy. That perhaps this seems to indicate that the UFC is now surpassing, to some extent, the viewership of the NHL, which has been around for forever. And this is, again, a 7-year deal, it looks like. Here we compare it against the NBA. So 76 billion over 11 years. Now that's huge, right? We're talking around 7 billion per year. If you do the math, right? 76 divided by 11 is around 7 billion. But again, the NBA is massive. It is huge. And it looks like they've done a multi-platform deal with ESPN as well as NBC and Amazon Prime. There were talks of, they average it out right at 6.9 billion. There were talks at one point of the UFC kind of splitting it up amongst different networks. Now it is a Paramount Plus CBS hybrid, but that's pretty much it, right? We're not seeing any other joint partnerships or deals with Netflix or anything like that, but that's it. So that's a pretty interesting point in comparison. It's almost 7 times what the UFC is getting per year. But again, the NBA is massive, okay? For mixed martial arts, I think mixed martial arts can compete with the NBA, and the UFC can compete with the NBA one day, but it's just not there yet. But even to be 1/7 right now, considering that professional basketball has been around for so long, I think it shows the power of the UFC and where it's heading to. Again, now we have the NFL, which is an even bigger player, and it makes sense, right? Now we compare that to the NFL, which is getting 10 billion a year for these licensing deals, again, amongst Amazon, CBS, Fox, NBC, and all these other networks. So this just gives an idea of where the UFC is and how it's starting to gain on some of these well-established sports and sport leagues that have been around for a very long time, beating out the NHL, which is crazy, and maybe not getting into equal footing yet with the NBA and NFL, but it's a big deal and it's a move in that direction. And now we're going to see what happens as the UFC is more accessible. Will the fan base grow? Will they eventually, once this deal expires, will they be able to get a $5 billion, $5 billion per year deal with some of these other platforms, 10 billion even, maybe, who knows? Sky's the limit. But I think it's pretty encouraging when you look at the growth from the last deal to the current deal Now, what are the specifics of the service from the fan perspective? Okay, so we have a Paramount Plus subscription, will be $7.99, but that's going to give you with ads, versus $12.99 per month, a premium plan where you get no ads. So think about it like this, right? If you're somebody like me that buys almost every pay-per-view, it's around $80 per pay-per-view, 13 pay-per-views a year. That's a little over $1,000. Now, even if I get the premium model, $13 a month times 12, that's $156. So like saving almost $850 per year to have access to everything, I think is amazing from the fan perspective. Now, once again, this is just kind of looking at some of these more particulars that we've already mentioned, that 1.1 billion per year with Paramount. And let's see. So again, unlike the UFC's ESPN era, okay, every UFC card is included with a Paramount Plus subscription. I think people were wondering that, but it's all inclusive. There's not going to be any add-ons, which is amazing. Some events get CBS reach. So we're going to talk about this in a second. That's unusual among US majors where streaming complements rather than fully replaces premium access. And the CBS simulcast should give the UFC bigger free-to-air moments under ESPN, closer to the NFL's occasional broadcast. I mean, that's crazy. So there are some downsides of going with Paramount Plus, just from an investor and a fan of the UFC wanting to see it grow. We're going to talk about that next. But this add-on partnership with CBS might actually make things better than just signing on exclusively with Netflix or Amazon. So why was I hoping that UFC went with Netflix ultimately? Because if we look at the subscriber base comparison, Netflix is crazy. That's like the population of the US, right? 300 million plus paid memberships right now as of July 2025. So that right off the bat would just give so much more exposure for existing Netflix subscribers to be like, oh, there's a UFC live event on right now. Let's check it out, right? And just getting a bigger platform for the growth of the UFC. Or Amazon, 200 million plus paid Prime members, right? Even Hulu, okay, Hulu's less than Paramount, but then you look at Paramount, it's a fraction of that. It's about, let's say, 80 million. Let's round it up to 80 million subscribers. That is, 2.5 times 80 million is the Amazon number, and we're getting almost a 1/4 of the Netflix, maybe even 1/5 of the Netflix subscriber base, depending on where exactly that sits, above 300 million. So that's substantially fewer people to spread the word and show people how amazing and exciting MMA is. But the positive side is they've now got CBS. So for select events, banger fights, the right fights, they're going to say, you know what? We're going to blow this up and we're going to stream this on CBS so everybody can enjoy the fights. And that's why I think that's why I think it was like a mutually beneficial deal for Paramount Plus. Why is Paramount Plus paying this massive rate? Some people are already saying it's kind of seems to be more than I bet what Netflix or these other guys had to offer, because for Netflix, they would say, fine, we're not going to give you as much. We got way more exposure. Paramount Plus is probably banking on existing UFC fans like me to immediately sign up for Paramount Plus, which I'm going to do. So they're going to get a wave of subscribers, straight up UFC fans that are just going to automatically migrate over. Will it be 1 million? Will it be 5 million? Will it be 10 million? I don't exactly know, but I guarantee you that's why they're getting this really nice fee of 1.1 billion per year just for the domestic rights. And again, I think it said on the previous slide, eventually they want to purchase the international rights when that is on the table. Right now, they just got the domestic rights to distribute this. And then so that's why they're paying this added amount. So the problem is, from my perspective, is like, all right, well, now they're not getting that exposure, but the beauty is we have CBS to come in. So CBS will be a way for the UFC occasionally to be like, you know what, we want to blast this out and see if we can increase the subscribers into Paramount Plus. And that's actually a win-win for Paramount Plus. So I don't think Paramount Plus will be like, no, we only want to do this on the streaming service. We don't want to push it out there. No, it's actually going to be win-win, because when you blast it out to the broader audience, that's going to lead to say, oh, you want to watch the next pay-per-view event only on Paramount Plus, boom, and then you bring it in. So it's like the two together, I think, are going to work really well to bring in more subscribers for Paramount Plus, make it a profitable situation for them for paying this high price tag. And then ultimately, it's still going to grow the sport, because we have this sort of like bat signal out to the public when it's on CBS. They're going to then come in, become UFC fans, and it's all going to be good for everybody. Now, the last thing I want to discuss is people have been talking about, what does this mean for the fighters? Are they getting a piece of this? And I think from what I can tell so far, I don't know if this is the whole story. From what I can tell so far, it's not as though the fighters are going to be getting any sort of cut from this 1.1 billion per year. Maybe they do, though. And maybe I don't know exactly how it's going to work. But the issue I think that will probably be resolved at some point before 2026 is now for champions. Again, this is a small subset of the fighters, but for the champs who were at one point getting pay-per-view points, now how does it work for them, right? What kind of added bump are they going to get in terms of that 1.1 billion per year that's now just being paid into the UFC on an annual basis? I'm going to guess, this is just me completely speculating, but I'm going to guess that they're going to give some bump in terms of the payment to the champs based on the streaming numbers. That would be my assumption, because that would be some sort of an equitable way to be like, all right, you're a huge, let's say we have Islam Makhachev, a huge star, Khamzat Chimaev, these guys that they're going to get way more people tuning in than other champs maybe who are newer on the scene or just don't have as big of a fan following. So I imagine they're going to divvy up some sort of a percentage or some sort of a piece of this 1.1 billion to the fighters via a bonus based on streaming numbers. That's my guess. I have no idea how it's going to work out. I have no idea if the fighters are going to be happy about it or not, but so all this stuff remains to be seen. But it seems for the current time being, there's no like set amount that they're saying, all right, we're going to take this amount and we're just going to pay out a massive bonus across the board. But what I'm hoping is, of course, this will give the UFC more money in terms of marketing, in terms of paying the fighters, in terms of paying their employees. So again, it should hopefully be a rising tide that raises all ships. That's my optimistic viewpoint. We shall see how it actually unfolds. Either way, in the short term, I think as fans of the UFC, as investors in TKO, whatever it may be, we can all celebrate and we can all say, this is a great day for the sport of mixed martial arts. This is a great day for the UFC and for UFC fans. And I think it's just going to continue to make the UFC a better organization, improve the quality of fights, etc. So win, win, win for everybody all around. That's my 2 cents. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys also believe that this is going to grow the sport exponentially? And also let me know in the comments, How do you think this is going to be for fighters at the end of the day? Let's say a year from now. Oh, last thing I'll say, the UFC White House card, I almost can guarantee you that's going to be on CBS. I'll bet you anything. I mean, that's what I would do if I was in charge. I think is I would have that sucker on CBS so everybody can watch on that July 4th celebration, because it's gonna be crazy. That's gonna be an ace up the sleeve for the UFC for sure. Anyways, I'm gonna let you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.